on the media and on Congress itself. I would continue to treat critics of the surge and our strategy in Iraq with respect and to acknowledge many of their concerns, especially about the Iraqis, as legitimate. So when members of Congress would demand that the Iraqis do more either militarily or in terms of key legislative actions to demonstrate that reconciliation was proceeding, I would say in testimony or to the press that I agreed. After all, that is exactly what I had called for in my email to Baker and Hamilton in mid-October. Further, I would legitimize their criticism by saying that their pressure was useful to us in communicating the limited patience of the American people to the Iraqi government. Although I steadfastly opposed as a bad mistake any legislated specific deadlines, I always tried to turn down the temperature of the debate. I divide the debate over Iraq during the last 2 years of the Bush administration into two phases. The first, from January 2007 until September 2007, continued to be about the war itself and, above all, the surge, and whether it made any sense. It was a bitter and nasty period. For the second phase, from September 2007 until the end of 2008, I changed my modus operandi, making the subject of the debate the pace of troop withdrawals so as to extend the surge as long as possible, but also to try to diffuse the Iraq debate as a major issue in the presidential election. Most of the Democratic presidential candidates, at least tacitly, acknowledged the need for a long-term, if dramatically reduced, U.S. presence in Iraq. My hope was that a new administration would proceed deliberately, not under pressure to take dramatic or precipitous action in terms of withdrawals, and thereby protect long-term U.S. interests, both in Iraq and in the region. The strategy largely worked for a number of reasons, all dependent on the actions and steadfastness of others. The first was the spread of the Awakening movement, led by Sheikh Sattar and his Sunnis in Anbar, together with the success of Petraeus and our troops in quickly beginning to change the conditions on the ground in Iraq, for the better, and in ways that within a few months became impossible to deny. We began to see signs that the surge was working as early as July. The second was the president's firmness and his veto power. A third was that the Republican minority in the Senate, for the most part, stayed with us and prevented the passage of legislation mandating timelines and deadlines for withdrawal of our forces. A fourth was that in matters of national security, Congress absolutely hates to challenge the president directly in a way that would saddle them with clear and full responsibility if things went to hell. Finally, negotiations with the Iraqis during 2008 on a strategic framework agreement placing an end date on our troop presence was critical in diffusing the issue of withdrawal in the 2008 presidential election, and buying still more time. But that was all still very much in the future when, on January 11th and 12th, 2007, Condi testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on the surge, and Pete Pace and I testified before the two Armed Services Committees. Although we all were grilled intensively, I think Condi had the more difficult session, mainly, I think, because she had been in the administration at the time the decision was made to invade Iraq, and so was the target of members' frustration about the entire course of the war. I suspect another reason she had a harder time was that at least 4 members of the Foreign Relations Committee were planning on running for president, and saw the hearing as a platform. Senator Chris Dodd of Connecticut accused the administration of using our soldiers as cannon fodder. Senator Joe Biden of Delaware said the new strategy was a tragic mistake, and more likely to make things worse. And Senator Barack Obama of Illinois said, "The fundamental question that the American people, and I think every senator on this panel, Republican and Democrat, are having to face now is, at what point do we say enough?" The Republicans weren't particularly supportive either. Indeed, Senator Chuck Hagel of Nebraska said that the surge would be the most dangerous foreign policy blunder in this country since Vietnam. Pace and I had a somewhat different experience, partly because the Republicans on the Armed Services Committees were generally more supportive of the president's war policies, especially John McCain. There was still a lot of criticism from the Democrats and tough questions from Republicans. I may also have gotten off a little easier because it was my first hearing after confirmation, and I was not my predecessor. I also won broad support when I announced my proposal to expand the size of the Army and Marine Corps during the hearings. And I think I caught them, as well as the White House, Petraeus, and others, off guard when I indicated